And joining me now from Brisbane is businessman Clive Palmer. Thank you for joining us, Mr Palmer.
Good evening, Lee. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, sir. There are slightly different accounts of this row with Tony Abbott. Were you both shouting and swearing? Mr Abbott says that he wasn't heated.
Well, certainly I was swearing at Mr Abbott, there's no doubt about that. I plead guilty on that because I take the view that people who are paid to push a political agenda by corporations shouldn't hold major positions in political parties in this country. Not just the Liberal Party, the Labor Party, the Greens and the National Party.
I'll talk about that with you in some detail, but firstly just on this spat. So was Mr Abbott shouting and swearing?
Well, I think I can't recall because I probably was shouting a bit more louder than he was, you know. So I really don't know. It certainly wasn't a pleasant meeting, and it was a shock to me that you'd raise such an issue that was so very basic that would have this sort of response. I only am a normal party member after all, but I am an Australian, I am a citizen of the country, and I do have a concern when I see vested interests paying people like I would pay my employees to push their agenda, and these people have a responsibility to the people who elect them and to the party itself.
How have things ended up with Tony Abbott? What's the state of your relationship now? Have you spoken?
Well, I've had a text from him tonight, I think, that so it's not about Tony Abbott, it's about the issue. Governments will come and go, but ideas will go on forever.
And
we want proper corporate governance.
I promise you I will come to that issue, but you've thrown out that text. What did it say?
I think he was happy the fact that at my press conference this afternoon I said I'd certainly apologise if I raised my voice, and I certainly was guilty, and I apologise for that, but I don't apologise for believing we need good corporate governance and transparency. It's too important for the people of Australia, not just in the Liberal Party, but every political party.
OK, on that issue, are you suggesting that the practice leads to corruption?
Yes, of course it does. I mean, if I retain a company to do my bidding for me, I expect it to work very hard, especially if I'm a corporation. And that's what a lobbyist does. It lobbies for your particular position in government. That becomes terrible if that person happens to be a president or a vice president of a ruling party which is in government, because it compromises the position. And whether there is nothing wrong at all, it's not seen to be transparent. And I think the perception is as bad as the practice.
Are you aware of specific incidents of corruption that have led you to take this stance?
We only got to read Tony Fitzgerald's report in Queensland, and I was the director of the National Party at the time, and we had to take a courageous stance, which cost us government for over 20 years, to say this sort of thing is above politics.
Sure, but
you're
raising it today, so have you seen any more recent examples?
Well, I'm just going on my experience, and I know this practice is bad. But firstly, I'm a delegate to the Federal Council from the Queensland Division of the LNP, and their council has passed a resolution banning this practice in Queensland, and their president, Bruce McIver, has forwarded a resolution for the Federal Council for this weekend. So I'm duty-bound to support him and to actually represent what they believe in.
You say you're going on your experience. Have you seen examples of Liberal lobbyists in senior positions in the party securing decisions favourable to their clients?
Well, I'm only an ordinary member of the party. I haven't been exposed to that, as you probably know, as Mr Abbott says. But I certainly think the practice and the structure is wrong. And if we take the former Deputy Premier of Queensland for the Labor Party, Mr Jim Elder, he resigned from the Labor Party before he became a lobbyist because he perceived that could be seen as a conflict of interest and a blight on his integrity, and he didn't want that to happen. That's the honourable thing. Nobody needs not stand for their position, but they've got to make a decision. Are they paid political lobbyists, or are they members of the Liberal, National or Labor parties or Greens, and they want to be respected for their political views rather from who's their paymaster? OK,
but you hold a very influential position in the party, even if you are a rank and file member, by virtue of the financial contributions that you make. Do you then promise that you won't lobby politicians on matters that relate to your interests?
Well, I joined the party 43 years ago, and I've been a member ever since. I've door-knocked, I've been a grassroots supporter, and I like to think I've got some influence, but not me personally, my ideas. People are not important in this sort of debate. It's what they're saying that's important, and every Australian knows that in their heart that it's wrong for people to take money to provide influence to our politicians and put pressure on our members of parliament. This is not the sort of thing we want in this country. It doesn't matter what political party you're in. I've never done it, and I hope nobody else does.
But doesn't your don't your financial contributions, by their own virtue, give you the sort of influence that allows you to lobby politicians to make decisions that favour you?
Well, I don't. You can't point to one that's favoured me anywhere. And in fact, recently in Queensland, the decision went against me in relation to the Waratah coal contract and went to the GVK group, and I've accepted that, and people do accept those things. That's how government is. You know, I employ over 2,500 Queenslanders. We produce over $1 billion a year for the Queensland economy. But the government's elected by the people. It's not responsible to me. It's not responsible to corporations. It's responsible for good governance. And all we're saying is that companies and others who can afford to pay political lobbyists shouldn't have their position confused with people, the average citizen, who can't afford that, and they shouldn't compromise their position by being heads or official members of political parties federally. I just think that's a fact, and I think we need to come to terms with it.
On Lateline in February this year, you were asked about Fairfax, and you said that you thought Gina Rinehart should buy 15% and that you'd buy a stake and that you could get the place humming again. Mrs Rinehart has her stake. What do you reckon?
Well, I'd like to see how it gets humming again, you know. Personally, I'm happy. I also said that we should have a media trust where proprietors didn't interfere with editorial content, and that seems to be different to Miss Hancock's views. But nevertheless, you know, Fairfax is a concern, and it's a concern because it stands as a last vestige of a democratic press in this country, the last century of the gate, to ensure that freedom reigns and we have a good democratic system and freedom of choice and plurality is there. It's not something that can be fought over or bought by money. It's far too precious than that.
A final question just about the Peter Slipper matter. Is the LNP in Queensland out to get Peter Slipper?
No, I don't think so. I think I've known Peter Slipper for over 40 years. He's an individual, he's got feelings, he's a person. He doesn't need to be sensationalised in the media, and I don't think any political party should be out to get any particular citizen. This confrontational process is what's wrong. What we need is more love and forgiveness and more reconciliation in this country, not to point the finger at people and to attack them for individuals, but to offer a hand of friendship and understanding and try to see our differences and have a national consensus in going forward. That's what we need in Australia.
That's not that often the case in politics, though, and I'm just wondering if people up there in the LNP have been looking for ways to get rid of him for a while.
Well, I don't think so. The LNP had a very good result at the last state election, and of course the democracy spoke. It spoke very loudly. So I think, you know, there'll be a democratic election coming up as soon as the Prime Minister gets the courage, and people can decide for themselves. Do they want to keep Peter Slipper as a member for Fisher, or do they want to vote for a Labor or a LNP candidate? That'll be up to them, and that's what our system's all about. That's what we've got to protect, and that's why we can't have people that are paid by corporations running our political parties.
Mr Palmer, thank you very much for coming in tonight.
It's a pleasure.